Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'd like to welcome Erin and Ryan, who have adopted 2 children through our agency. So welcome.
Thanks for having us, Amanda.
So our goal for today is to touch on what your experience was like adopting 2 children through our agency, some of the similarities, the differences, because I think it can be really helpful for folks, especially when they're coming back for round 2, of what to be prepared for. Many would think that the journey would look exactly the same, but in actuality, there may be differences, and we want to highlight those today. So before we jump into that piece, can you just give a general overview of your experience with our agency when you adopted through us and your current family dynamic today?
So we decided to adopt in 2018 and didn't actually really kick off the process until 2019. And we adopted our daughter Taylor in December of 2021 and our daughter Murphy in April of 2024. So she's turning 1 this weekend. You know, when we made the decision, totally overwhelmed. How do we decide which agency, blah, blah, blah. We talked to a few friends who had adopted and found Adoptions from the Heart, did some research and just knew that this was the agency we wanted to work with. And after the first adoption, we had such a great experience, felt so supported by the whole team and knew that it would kick off again. It took us a lot longer to get into the second adoption process than we thought, just because it's a little harder to complete paperwork when you have a kid running around and keeping you busy. But yeah, what'd I miss?
I think you got most of it.
Would you say that your expectations the first time versus the second time were different at all? Like, having gone through it, what were you envisioning for the second go around when you came into the process again?
I think it's like anything. We were confident, oh, we've been through this before, we've done it already, so we kind of thought we knew everything. We had the kid at home, everything was kind of going well. The interesting piece was that there still was a lot for us to learn from an educational perspective. Once you do something once, there's just a lot of different scenarios that kind of alter things a little bit. I think we kind of went in thinking, oh, this will be a piece of cake. In reality, it wasn't too dissimilar from the first time, and that, kind of constantly learning and figuring things out.
The paperwork was easier. We knew how to get all the stuff together, so that didn't take us as long. We were able to really reuse a lot of the materials that we had built the first time and just make some changes based on changes in our life since we had built our profile. We kind of felt like the classes were going to be a waste of our time. Oh my gosh, we're already parents. What more could we learn? And one of the biggest takeaways that we both had that really prepared us for the second adoption was a class about talking about adoption to your existing child. When we started the process, Taylor was 18 months?
A little
over 18 months. So she was talking, but not a ton. And by the time we actually got back on the list to adopt, she was a little over 2. And so she was very aware. We read adoption books all the time at home. So we talked about the fact we're going to adopt a baby soon. When we bring that baby home, the mom and dad are going to make a decision over a period of time if that baby's going to live with us forever. And so it felt a little silly, and we had to prepare all of our friends and family and also her daycare to say, hey, don't congratulate Taylor on being a sister when we bring a baby home, because we don't know if it, there's revocation periods of varying lengths depending on where this baby comes from. And she was really adamant about it. So she would, when we did finally get placed, she would actually tell people at daycare, if they said, congratulations on being a big sister, she would say, I'm not a sister yet. Her birth mommy, the belly she grew in, she's deciding if we're going to be her forever family, but maybe I'll be a sister soon. And it was just, it's hilarious hearing those words out of a, 29-month-old's mouth, but she articulated it for herself.
How would you say that I know that you guys experienced a disappointment the first time before you were placed with Taylor, and then you experienced another disappointment the second go around prior to being placed with your second child. What would you say were the biggest comparisons between the two, and how you handled the disappointment the second go around versus the first?
One of the big things is just with the toddler, we were so busy. So there is a lot less time to focus on it. And also when we were going through the process the first time, it was kind of like peak COVID, changes things a little bit. But I think it's never really something you can prepare for. I think the second time around, we just had a lot more going on. We had some experience kind of dealing with that weird sense of loss that comes with those. And, I don't think it's something you can ever quite prepare for, but I feel like we were fairly well equipped the second time through.
With Taylor's adoption, we were so excited to get matched that we very much celebrated with our family and didn't prepare them for all the things that we had worked through with the agency and in the trainings. And so when it didn't work out, we were obviously devastated for a period of time, but I think our family actually handled it worse than we did because we just didn't prepare them well. And there was also a really large gap in time between that disappointment and us getting matched with Taylor. It was almost like a year and a half. And so the disappointment before Murphy's adoption was actually less than a week until we got matched with Murphy. And so when you ask what's the similarities and differences, and when Ryan said we kind of thought we knew everything, every situation is so different. No matter how prepared we felt we were for the first or second adoption, there's just nothing that can prepare you for the email situations that come up that you thought you would know how to say yes or no to really quickly and just are really challenging to navigate. We got home from the disappointment right before we adopted Murphy, and our social worker Sheila, who we absolutely love, messaged us and said, hey, you can stay off the list for as long as you want to. And we went on a really long bike ride, and Ryan said, yeah, maybe we should take a week or two off. And I said, what's the point, right? Last time it took us 18 months to get matched again. We might as well just get back on and heal over the period of time. And 3 days later, Sheila called me just laughing hysterically, and she said, guess what, you got to pick up a baby tomorrow. And I said, haha, that's funny, a week ago this thing didn't work out. And she's like, no, seriously, you were just picked and your baby's ready for you to take home. So I still get a little goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah, I'm not even sure we'd unpacked.
Yeah, we still had all the mound of baby gear loaded somewhere in our house.
Any advice that you would give families who are anxious about the second time around and just possibly there being a longer wait time or experiencing a disappointment, or just general suggestions you may have now that you've lived it?
It was different. I mean, I work in data. And so the first adoption, I had a spreadsheet and I tracked all the months, okay, this number of people had these situations. Should we refactor our profile key and what we're open to, and have more at-bats to be chosen and all of this stuff. And it just is something that you can't control. And so the second time around, I feel like the anxiety was less because we knew that this is really out of our hands. And like Ryan said, we were busy, we were chasing a toddler around. And so, yes, it's hard to wait. It's never easy to wait. It's a little bit easier when you have a kid to tuck in at night and give a big hug and talk about, life with, and not just be like, hey, do you think someone's going to call us tomorrow about this? Every single day.
Yeah, I think toddlers breed patience as well, which is in this process, something that is, I find helpful at least, is kind of just, it's out of our hands, just wait, and it'll all work out in the long run. That's kind of our mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. I find that a lot of couples, the anxiety goes down a little bit the second or third time around for the reasons that you're describing. One, you've been through it. Two, I think you have other kiddos in the home that are kind of distracting you, and the concept of whatever's meant to be sometimes becomes even stronger. You've gone through this journey, and the recognition of you truly don't have control over this, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and just kind of being in the moment and remembering that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and just trying to go with whatever your heart is feeling. And it sounds like for you guys, making that choice on that bike ride to go back into the books immediately is what ultimately led to you being placed with your second child. So that's great. Talk to us a little bit about the types of open adoption that you have, if you do have any openness with birth parents for each of your children, and how you manage that as a family.
Both of our adoptions are obviously open adoptions. With Taylor's, we've never really had any contact with birth mom other than, I guess I'll call it one-way contact. We send her, letters and pictures. We have never really been able to get a solid confirmation that she's received them or anything like that. So, since she was born, we've kind of had no contact, and, obviously things change, and, that doesn't mean that's how it's going to be in the future. But that's kind of where we currently are. And then I would say with Murphy, our second daughter, it's kind of the opposite situation. We have met her birth mom once. We've had a couple meetings plagued by toddler illnesses, but she's very communicative. We email her pretty constantly. She responds to the pictures, so that's kind of a much different scenario. So there's a pretty stark contrast between the two. We would have the same level of openness, but from the birth mom, I guess their level of participation, which is, kind of something as our older daughter, kind of grows and increases her vocabulary and starts asking a lot of questions, which is in the stage she's in, we're trying to kind of figure out how to navigate.
It's kind of the same, like you prepare, you like check all the boxes on a piece of paper and you get matched with a human being. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the process and forget about the person. And so you kind of say, oh, I know what's happening. I checked the same boxes. We're going to have a similar situation. And every single person has a backstory of like why they're feeling the way that they are. And so both of our kiddos have siblings, like their birth moms both have kids, especially now that we have 2 kids and know how busy that keeps you, like are very understanding of let's just be incredibly consistent in like showing love and care to the women who helped build our family and are part of our extended family, talk about them regularly and read lots of adoption books with both kids. And so like if and when Taylor's birth mom wants to come into her life, I think Taylor will be very excited about it. And if it never happens, I'm really hopeful that like she can build a relationship with Murphy's birth mom in a way that she kind of better understands adoption in general. Like it's been really lovely to build a relationship with Murphy's birth mom because again, we like didn't know what to expect. And it's kind of scary to like, when you've gone through it one time and not had any relationship, to navigate that the second time around. Yeah, it's been great to say, hey, I know we only have to send you pictures for 6 months, but it seems like you really enjoy getting these. Do you want us to keep sending you them? Yes, right? So like now we email back and forth and send her pictures every month. And yeah, we've been trying to meet up again. It's been a little bit challenging, wintertime doldrums, and everyone's been sick, but hopeful to get that next meeting on the calendar soon.
I just love both of your energies when it comes to openness. Like you both seem so genuine about the contact and the hope for the future for both of your children. And I think that's exactly what we all try to encourage. Obviously, every situation is different and we can't always pinpoint what a birth parent is going to be comfortable with. And also that changes over time because different things happen in your life and their life that can change the dynamic of your relationship. But you guys just seem so open to the door staying open.
So when we were waiting between the disappointment and Taylor's adoption, I always confuse disruption and disappointment. The fact that they both start with D's really just messes up my brain. I remember our social worker at the time saying, hey, why don't you just listen to some of the podcasts that we have and maybe it'll make you feel better during this wait time. And again, kind of my mentality was kind of like a binary, like you either have a relationship or you don't have a relationship. And one of the episodes seasons ago, I'm dating myself in Adoptions from the Heart materials, were a number of birth moms talking about their relationships with their adopted kids' families and how they had just changed over time based on their whatever was going on in their life. Like I couldn't have a relationship because it was too hard when they were really little. And then I had a relationship for a period of years and then I had some personal stuff going on. And so again, it just very much humanizes the whole thing that like in the same way that we're flaky right now because Murphy's about to walk and every place that we go that isn't baby proofed is like just terrifying. Life happens. And so just keeping that approach that like, we don't know. And so just keep talking about it with Taylor, with Murphy in a way that's like, we'll figure it out over time. It's going to change. And the questions that Taylor asks now are oftentimes more about Murphy. Like, hey, are we going to meet Murphy's birth mom again? Like the mommy that she grew in her belly, that type of situation. So it's easier for her to talk about from like someone else's situation. And it's also helpful because Taylor talks about adoption fairly regularly. It's allowed us to like find other people that we would have never known were adopted. Like one of her daycare teachers like 6 months ago was adopted and Taylor found that to be like the coolest thing ever. And it's because she feels so comfortable like having those types of conversations and asking questions and she doesn't.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
I'm rambling.
What you're saying is truly so, it's like the reality of what we try to teach and try to encourage. First off, I love the fact that you were proactive of hearing other birth parents' stories, especially if anybody's in a situation where they don't have contact or have never met their birth parent or really don't understand the other side of things. Hearing any birth parent share their perspective can help you better understand your dynamic because there's so many similarities amongst birth parents and the choices that they make and the feelings of grief and loss that may come in different spouts over time. And I think it's important that folks keep that in mind when they're trying to navigate what type of contact they have or don't have. And I agree with you. Most people, it's either we have it or we don't. So if initially we don't have it, okay, I can kind of check that box off, close that door a little bit, move on with life. And what we have found is that folks who struggle later on are the ones who maybe kept that door shut, not realizing that it could open again at some point because that birth parent could come back. And we recognize that that can be challenging for you as parents, the kind of in and out. But the concept here is we signed up for open adoption, and this is a commitment that you're making. And for you guys, it sounds like you have conversations regularly with both of your children to the point that Taylor, is so well educated. The language she's using, that's all a result of what you've been giving her and what you're exposing her to. And she doesn't even have contact with her birth parents right now. Could happen in the future. So I think that's something that we want our audience to pick up on, because it can be hard for folks who later on in life have to revisit the concept of openness when maybe the door has been shut for quite some time. My question for you is this: oftentimes we have families that struggle when there's different levels of openness. So similar to your situation, maybe first child, there isn't really contact, second child, there is. What advice or suggestions would you give to families that are struggling with the idea of things being different? How am I gonna manage this? How am I going to have my kids both feel good and okay, knowing that one has something more than the other? Because I think that's often what leads to, we don't want contact with the second birth parent because it's too much for us to deal with the first child. So what would you say to folks who are in that space of trying to navigate that?
So when we were filling out the profile the second time around, I would say the number one thing that we disagreed on was number of meetings per year, because I looked at all the data. I'm like, look, there's been an increase. People have been wanting to meet 3 or 4 times a year. Let's do it. And Ryan was like, hey, I'm thinking about a world when the kids are 10. He's much more realistic. I'm optimist. I'm thinking about a world where the kids are 10. They're both in soccer on the weekends and blah, blah, blah. And Taylor doesn't get any weekends, maybe still, with her birth mom. And yet we spend 4 weekends meeting with our second kid's parents. That feels really hard. And yes, we can break it up. Maybe one of us takes one and XYZ, but that feels really challenging, and it's a lot of weekends. Let's talk about what's realistic based on now and later and anticipated situations. And so we had some really good, I think hard, challenging conversations about what we would be okay with. Also knowing that, I can't remember if it was 3 that we signed up for with Taylor, and her birth mom signed off on that, and we've never met her. So again, it's you can only talk through so many scenario planning situations. It's also, I think, a little bit easier. We're not the best people to ask that right at this very point in time. Murphy's 1, she can't talk. Taylor's 3.5. So the questions she asks are very inquisitive for 3.5. We love that. But it's going to be a lot harder when she's 10 and she says, hey, it's really hard for me to spend time with Murphy's birth mom, knowing that I haven't met my mom. And so that's just also something that it's easier for us to have those conversations now and talk about how we can't plan for everything. How are we going to navigate that? How would we talk to her about this? And part of it is just, again, exposing her to more and more. So we've loved, I don't know if you're going to roll this out at other locations, but we have loved the Triangle Time adoption story time. We've taken both kids to both of those over the past few months. And so having Taylor exposed to other kids that are adopted, a whole room full of kids, everyone here is adopted. She's everyone's adopted. I think has been a good space for her. And so having her build that cohort of people that hopefully when she gets older, she can have those conversations with people who have similar situations, as opposed to us just talking to her about it, I think will be helpful.
It's also kind of an opportunity to enforce some other age appropriate messages, which is everybody shows love in different ways. Everybody deals with things differently. Things change, that you can't expect things. So it's a lot of times it's asking her clarity on what information she's looking for, and then kind of reinforcing those messages has been, obviously we're still in the early stages of it, and it's going to get more technical and difficult to navigate, but that's kind of our tact now is, she loves you, this is how she shows her love, there are all these things that, as a 3-year-old she can comprehend.
I think just trying to normalize as much of this as we can, right? And what I'm hearing from you is that you both are having conversations to prepare for the future of what may happen, or questions or feelings that may come up, which is part of being a good parent, right? But then there's also some level of just doing the best you can now to expose her to as much as possible, being in spaces where these conversations are normalized, and having both of your children recognize the bigger picture of adoption, so that, not to say either one of them won't have some big emotions down the road, right? When they're able to kind of comprehend and understand things. And maybe Taylor will go through some moments of like, why won't my birth mom have a relationship with me? But there's also the hope that through the exposure, through, potentially Murphy's birth mom kind of taking her under her wing as well, there will be less of the bigger feelings, right?
Yeah.
And more of the, oh, this just makes sense. And my birth parent is just not in the space to be able to have a relationship, but I do understand the experience that she may have gone through all the exposure that my family has given me, and all these spaces of recognizing that there are other adoptees out there. Love is love, and this is where we're at. So I really appreciate you guys sharing all that. It can be hard for folks who are adopting again, because there can be a different type of anxiety. And I think you guys have hit on some of the big topics and discussion that we want to make sure that folks are starting to think about as they're preparing to build their family.
Totally agree with you. And I think it's challenging to think about like the whole thing, right? Like I think a lot of people's brains go into like, okay, I got to fill out all this stuff, and then this happens, and then, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to have a conversation like what Aaron and Ryan just talked about with Taylor? That seems really hard. But it's like these little baby building blocks over time. And when Taylor asks, like, do you think she misses her? And I say, who misses who? Like the belly that Murphy grew in. And then, we obviously like talk to her about it, get emotional. We're like, oh my gosh, like, do you think she's having any? And then she immediately just goes, can we go get ice cream? Right? It is such a 3-year-old brain. And so it also like helps us to be like, okay, just answer the questions that she's asking. Don't try to like think too much about it. She'll ask more over time, as long as we give her the space to like do so. So
we really appreciate you guys sharing your story. And I think this conversation is going to be really helpful for folks who are looking to build their family again. We're just grateful for you for sharing your experience.
Grateful for you guys for all the support we've gotten from Adoptions from the Heart. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Continue to tune in, and we'll see you next time.